Welcome to Ancient Faith Today Live. Christ is risen. What an amazing Pascha this has been. I'm sorry about the lights. If it looks a little dim in here, we're having trouble with the lighting, but Christ is risen. He is the light of the world, and I hope that your Paschal celebration was amazing as mine. I'm just amazed to see so many of the pictures from parishes all over America and all over the world. Did you hear about this church it was like a Greek church in London that had 200 converts? 200 converts. It's just like unbelievable. And I know that parishes all over the country brought in dozens and dozens of new Orthodox Christians, baptizing, chrismating, receiving communion. It was just unbelievable. And the weather was glorious here, which always makes for a great Paschal celebration. Obviously, we are still continuing this week with the Paschal Divine Liturgies. I was very privileged to be at the Monastery of the Holy Transfiguration in Elwood City this morning with Mother Christophora and all these blessed sisters of the monastery, as well as local priests, brother priests, and people. It was really a magnificent, bright Tuesday, and I hope that yours was good also. All right. So let's go ahead and get right to the subject. Obviously this wasn't a planned subject, but I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to speak about the Roman papacy. All right. Now, let's get all of the preliminaries out of the way. And that is, we are Orthodox Christians. We are not Roman Catholics. We are going to speak respectfully about Roman Catholicism. We are not, however, going to kowtow. We are not going to, say things that aren't true, nor are we going to pile on them. I've seen both sides of this on the internet when Pope Francis died, and it was like, he's a heretic, he's going to hell. If you say that, you're ridiculous. Like, you should go to church and repent. This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But also, if we are treating a Roman Catholic Pope as though there are no differences between us, that's wrong too. But it's not as wrong as condemning a man who has just died. So, let's get it together. As Orthodox Christians, we're much better than this. Although the online behavior of some is frankly embarrassing. And I hope that, maybe the Paschal celebration will have softened some hearts. I think would be a very, very good thing. So what we'd love for you to do is to join us in our YouTube live chat. You can go to youtube.com/Ancient Faith Ministries. Join us there. We'd love to hear from you. We have some regulars in there. Let's see. We have Paul and Naval, Orange Gazer, Steve, James, Christ is risen. And let's see. Antikythera Consulting. You've got to get a new name in there. You're killing me with this name here. Rosalind, God bless you. Christ is risen. James, very nice to have you all today. Come on in. The water's fine. And we are about to talk about the Roman papacy. Also, if you want to join us on Facebook, you can go to facebook.com/Ancient Faith Ministries. You'll see us live there. You can also send us a text message to 412-206-5012. That's 412-206-5012. Let us know what you think about all of this. That would be very, very good. All right. So I'm going to ask Simon just to bring up the first slide here, just by way of introduction. Okay. We're going to talk about today Pope Francis. Now, this this subject, I mean, we could just ignore it, right? We could, as Orthodox Christians, we could say, well, it's not our problem. He's not our bishop. This is like not our issue, not our business. And that certainly, in a certain sense, would be fair for us to do that. However, and I'm going to say this a couple of times in the show today, the online experience, the online community, sometimes what we call like the orthosphere, right? All Orthodox people that are on different forums and different YouTube channels and so forth. We can be very siloed because this is what the online community and social media does, right? What it does is it makes you feel like nobody else exists. It makes you feel like, oh, well, it's like, look at all my friends. They're all Orthodox. And I've even had people say, did you see such and such on Facebook, that somebody posted? And I said, well, they're not my friend. And they're like, oh, well, I thought everybody could see that. No, this is the problem with social media is you only see what you see. And unfortunately, Orthodox people, I think we're probably not the only ones that have this, but we get this myopia. We get this myopic way of seeing things as though there is nothing, absolutely nothing going on outside of Orthodoxy, right? I mean, that would be very, very nice, but that's not true. There are 1.4 billion Catholics, 1.4 billion Catholics, Roman Catholics, right? And I mean, this is a large portion of Christendom. This is a large portion of people that say they follow the Lord Jesus Christ. And we also have 1,000-year or so, depending on how you're counting it, common history with the Roman Church. Now, I'm not going to gloss over any of that. We're not going to get into a deep history of this. That's not the point here. But I think what we need to do is see that, there are things that we can learn, both bad and good, from what goes on outside the church. Listen to what I'm saying. There's some good things that happen, but there's also some really bad things that happen. Now, we're not going to be like the publican and the Pharisee that they're going to say, we're not going to say, well, thank God I'm not a Roman Catholic, right? Thank God that I'm not going to, be like them, right? So it's important for us to do that. All right. It's important for us to treat this particular subject with compassion and with mercy. Nelson Tirado, I am not sure who you're addressing there. I'm not sure what you're addressing. All right. Okay, here we go. So the first thing that we want to look at is Orthodox reflections on the Roman papacy and Francis's pontificate. The idea here is that we have to be able to look back at history, right? We need to be able to look back at history. We need to be able to look at what the papacy has become, right? What the papacy has become. And I think it's very interesting because I think it's very consistent, right? It's very consistent that the papacy in a particular way has been on a trajectory for over 1,000 years. And a lot of that is actually coming to fruition. We can see what is happening there. All right. And again, if there are things that maybe you see them differently. Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your understanding of this. And then we're going to talk a little bit first about Francis' pontificate, whatever was good. I think there's a lot of challenging things there, and we need to look at that. We don't need to rejoice in it, but we need to recognize it for what it is. All right. So the next thing I want you to do, just watch this. This is only like a minute long, just a little introductory video to be able to hear what was going on in terms of the way that the news was presenting the death of Pope Francis. Go ahead and play that, Simon.
And we do begin tonight with the death of Pope Francis, the leader of 1.3 billion Catholics around the world, and a spiritual figure whose humility and tolerance was felt well beyond the Church. Tonight, the Vatican revealing the Pope died of a stroke and heart failure, slipping into a coma just hours after his last appearance from the balcony in St. Peter's Square to celebrate Easter Sunday. During his 12 years as pontiff, Pope Francis proved himself to be the people's pope, reaching out to the poor, the forgotten, the people at the margins. From the moment the former cardinal from Argentina was introduced as Pope Francis, he set the Church on a new course. The first pope from Latin America, the first Jesuit, the first to elevate women to positions of church authority, the first to allow priests to bless same-sex couples, asking early on as a pope, "Who am I to judge?" And another first, Pope Francis agreeing to the first ever town hall with American television. Tonight, that moment, we waited at the door inside Vatican walls and then our walk right there across the courtyard with Pope Francis. Millions would watch as the Pope took questions from Americans back here in the U.S. But it has been a remarkable 24 hours. The Pope, who had been in failing health, his battle with pneumonia in the hospital and then out, and then appearing on Easter Sunday. There was so much hope he was getting better. But then the world learning he died just hours later.
So it's very interesting to note how the news presents Pope Francis, right? And one of the clips that I'm going to play for you later is actually showing you that Roman Catholics, certain Roman Catholics, kind of understood that the worldly success, the worldly acceptance of Pope Francis was actually embraced by the news, was embraced by a certain portion of society to be held up as like, this is what we believe the Church could be, that the Church could actually say, we could ordain women, we could bless gay marriages, we could really embrace the modernism project. And I think that this is why there was such a laudation of his papacy, especially within the sort of the mainstream media, right? It's very important to understand that. I am going to play for you a clip from a show a little bit later called Catholicism Unscripted or Catholic Unscripted. And it's very interesting because they are going to lay out that actual point to say that one of the things that made him so popular was that Pope Francis's beliefs about the Church kind of played into this modernism project. And that's why he became so divisive. I think we have to recognize this. We have to recognize that, this is problematic. So as Orthodox Christians, next slide, why should we care? Like, again, this is not our problem, right? This is not a Orthodox bishop. This is not a problem that we have in Orthodoxy. Well, actually it is, right? It is an issue that we have in Orthodox Christianity, except, and I want you to hear what I'm saying here. no matter how much we Orthodox Christians deny this, and this is why I was talking about how the orthosphere, by the way, I never said ortho bro, whoever said that. I don't speak those words. I don't care about that. The orthosphere is myopic because we sometimes pretend like there's no Catholic Church. There's no Roman Catholic Church. There's no, there's nothing going on there. The reality is the Roman Pope, whether we like it or not, whether we care or not, is the most recognized Christian figure in the world. He is the most recognized Christian figure in the world. Nobody is recognized more than him. Nobody outside of Orthodoxy, very few people know who Patriarch Bartholomew is. Nobody knows who Patriarch Kirill is. Nobody knows who the Patriarch of Bulgaria or Romania or Serbia. Nobody knows who these people are. Now, you might say, well, who cares? But there's an important issue here. The issue is the bishop as the one who keeps the Orthodox faith, the orthodoxy of the Christian faith, rightly dividing the word of truth, as Paul says to St. Timothy. This is important because you have to witness to the world. If we Orthodox Christians, because look, America is a kind of aberration when it comes to orthodoxy. When you go to Russia, which I've been there many times, you go to the old country, you go to Lebanon, Syria, Romania, Bulgaria, all of these places. Their understanding of orthodoxy is really quite insular. It's really quite insular. And we Orthodox Christians in America, I believe, understand evangelism. We understand the value of witnessing to other people. Now, we can't blame necessarily Russia and Syria and Serbia and all of these places that have been oppressed for hundreds of years, right? They've been oppressed by the Turks. They've been oppressed by the communists. They have a difficult time understanding exactly why orthodoxy should be an evangelistic faith. At least Catholicism understands that. At least the Catholic leadership understands that. They understand that there is a public face to their church. Now, I think playing into what the public wants is a very bad idea. But one thing that we Orthodox need to understand is they are a massive presence in the world. This is extremely important for us to understand. And so, I can remember, I would say like 30 years ago, when the Roman Catholic Church was going through a lot of different changes and so forth, there were a lot of Orthodox that were, in a way, jealous. They were saying, oh, why don't we have all of these reforms? Why can't we be like the Catholic Church? Why can't we have liturgies at night? Why can't we just lessen our fasting rules? And, now, of course, we understand and we see the damage that it has done to the Roman Catholic Church. But my point is, you cannot get around the influence that the Roman Catholic Church has. Roman Catholics, by the way, they are very faithful members of their church. They are very faithful to the Roman Church. And sometimes to a T, no matter what they do. And we need to understand that our bishops, especially our bishops, they need to present themselves in a way that is somehow bringing the Orthodox faith to the world. To the world. You know, what other person could go to a stadium, just name a country, I don't know, Namibia, Zambia, India, whatever, and get 1 million people at a mass? Like, that's the papacy. That's what they do. We would never get that. If the patriarch came to the United States, how many people would show up? How many people? What, 500? I mean, this is the problem, is that we have, we are myopic to such an extent that we have lost sight of the world around us. Not that we embrace the world, but that we invite the world. So the papacy and the death of Pope Francis and the death of all the popes, this actually is something that should concern us from the standpoint of, look at how they are reacting. And I think some of the reactions are really very, very interesting. All right, now, next slide. One of the issues with Roman Catholicism, that we have said this for a long time. When you look at the trajectory of Roman Catholicism, when you look at the growth of Roman Catholicism, right? Especially when the Roman Empire moved to Constantinople, and then the Western Roman Empire was in decline. Then the Islamic hordes came into the East. Then you started to have a little bit of a decline in the Byzantine Empire. And then you had the so-called Holy Roman Empire starting to build up in the West. What happened was the Roman Church always became concerned with power and influence. Power and influence. And, on the one hand, yes, I'm criticizing Orthodox bishops because they're not known at all. I mean, obviously, the one that would be really well known in a land would be Russia, Patriarch Kirill. He is a very large figure. But other than that, no. However, the Roman Catholic Church has consistently been, a church that is constantly concerned about power and constantly concerned about influence. And what this has caused is a political divide in the Roman Catholic Church. And that's what we're seeing right now. We are seeing a tremendous hot divide within the Roman Catholic Church. Now, what I find personally fascinating is that, Roman Catholics, no matter their stripe, their political stripe, right, left, middle, whether they are, just common Roman Catholics, they don't have a view on that. They just go to mass once in a while. I think that they still feel very sad when the Pope dies. They still feel very sad when the Pope dies. This shows you the influence of the papacy in the lives of Roman Catholics. And today, the Roman Catholic Church, whether they admit it or not, and I mean, how can they not admit it? Look at all of the different podcasts and the different views in Roman Catholicism. They are, in a way, tearing themselves apart, right? They're really tearing themselves apart. Look at, next slide, really, in a way, the breathless interest in who will be the next pope, right? It's like, it's all they care about. Who will be the next pope? And the way it's presented, even among Roman Catholics, is it's like a political, obviously it's not a vote, but it's presented in a very political way. This is terrible. This is really terrible. And, you know, I don't think Roman Catholics actually see this. I don't think that they understand that. But to an Orthodox Christian, this is really terrible. This is terrible because you reduce the church to a kind of political organization. You know, oh, this candidate is very conservative. Oh, this one is very liberal. Oh, this one's going to continue the Francis agenda. Oh, this one was very admiring of Pope Benedict, you see? And this political divide reduces the church no longer to simply the body of Christ, which is existing in the world, to experience by the Holy Spirit the blessings of the kingdom of God until Christ comes, right? Now it has a political agenda. Now the church becomes a political movement to say, like, we need to, I don't know what, we need to raise the stature of women. And the way that we can do that is we can ordain them, you see? Or we need to normalize gays, LGBT agenda by accepting gay marriage. This is exactly the problem here. The problem is that the Roman Catholic Church, which is so massive and so powerful and so wealthy and so large, that it has become a kind of political force in the world. And that's a problem. It's something that we really have to think about, because I think, it's easy for us to be jealous as Orthodox Christians. And right, like, I'm sure if you've been online, there are Roman Catholics that say, oh, you Orthodox, it's clear you're not the true church because you're tiny, right? There was even one YouTuber, it was the most ridiculous thing I ever heard in my life. Brian Holdworth, is that his name? This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. He said that when Byzantium was destroyed in the 15th century, right, that this was proof that Orthodoxy was not the true church. This is stupid, right? In fact, I would say just the opposite. I would say that the weakness of Orthodoxy is, in a way, the way that God is allowing us, to struggle and to have true humility is in our smallness, right? Now, we shouldn't stay small. We should be evangelistic. We should bring the whole world into the Orthodox faith. However, let's make sure that we're always keeping our wits about us in terms of our understanding of this Orthodox faith. All right. So let's do a little, and what I want to do is in the chat, okay? I want you guys and girls, please, to give me some of your reflection on Pope Francis. What were some good things about Pope Francis? and what were some controversial things about Pope Francis? Okay. What were some good things and what were some controversial or bad things? So give it to us in the chat. I want to hear about that. Want to hear what you have to say about that. Okay. What was good about Pope Francis? What was not so good? Now, I would say that one thing that Pope Francis, I think, was really very, very good. Now, whether this was feigned or not, let God judge. However, he certainly cared for the kind of outskirts of the church. He wasn't so concerned about the large Roman Catholic countries, even though he came from one, right? However, he really wanted to get out there and make sure that the church was thriving in certain places. Now, the way that he did that, but he really did care for those who were outside in remote areas. And I'm not using the term marginalized. We'll get to that in a second. But those who were far out in smaller, weaker, third world countries, he did really care for them. All right. I think that was one thing. Let's see what some people here say. If we go down to, excuse me, orthodoxist proud infidel. Orthodoxist proud infidel. It says, I liked how he went to Africa and kissed the feet of a leader to stop the killing. Yeah. I think he did actually care about peace. And here's the one thing that I'll say about that, just in my estimation. He's like the only one that can get away with that, right? He's the only one that actually can call for peace and it means something. And again, I'm going to talk about our own church. Like, who, if you look at our church, it's kind of embarrassing right now, right? We have one Orthodox country and another Orthodox country, and they're fighting one another, and then the government gets involved, and then the government starts a fake church, and then all of a sudden, it's just horrible. It's absolutely horrible that something like that would happen. However, we have to recognize that Pope Francis, he really wanted peace, and he knew, and I think all the popes know, that they have this kind of world voice. They have a unique voice on the stage of the world, and they can use it for good. So I think that's a very, very good thing. All right. Now, let's see. Paul Kelly. Paul Kelly said something very good here, and I think this is very important for us to see. Paul Kelly said he deposed pro-life priests and bishops. This was a huge problem. This was a huge problem for Francis because he absolutely did this. Pope Francis marginalized conservative, pro-life, pro-traditional, Latin Mass, and we'll get into that in a little bit, priests and bishops. The bishops that would not toe the line that he wanted were absolutely, simply, they were either removed from their position, right? There was that bishop in Tyler, Texas. Forgive me, I don't remember his name. There was, Paul Kelly said, Father Pavone. He was the head of the pro-life Catholic group, right? And then they sort of, I don't know, found some dirt on him or something like that, right? Elizabeth, she said here, Father, what's wrong with the term marginalized? I just didn't want it to mean something that I wasn't implying at this point. That's all. All right. Okay. So yeah, he really did that. And I'm going to play a clip in a little bit about that very thing that really angered some Roman Catholics. And I think that's a problem. When you use this kind of power to silence certain voices in the church simply because you want to get through an agenda, that's a problem. That's a problem. And thank God, the one thing that we can say, is that even though we have bishops in our church, the bishops are extremely important. Now, I do think sometimes online, certain people will speak flippantly about bishops. They will be dismissive about bishops. But the reality is, the bishop is not simply some guy that comes to church once a year, and that's when we have to stand and we have to watch him get dressed in church, and then the service is longer, and then we go downstairs and we have a banquet, right? Like, that's usually Orthodox people's experience of a bishop. But the reality is, bishops are essential to maintain the unity of the faith in the church. But what they are not supposed to do is to assert their own agenda. And unfortunately, that's what Pope Francis did. He did that, right? Here's another one. He said, Steve Lenoris, the next one. The worst thing that Francis said is that all religions lead to God. That is even worse than blessing gay couples. Yeah. Well, it's all a matter of increments, right? So he did say that, right? He said that all religions lead to God. And I think we did a show on it. I think it's out there. And, we can't agree with this. Now, but I will also say, we have to admit as Orthodox Christians that we have had bishops and we have had priests that have said the same thing. How many bishops do we have in the Middle East who, because of their sort of hundreds of years of dhimmi status, say anything that they have to placate the Muslim leaders in order to kind of keep the peace, right? This is bad. This is not good. And we have to be very careful that when we point the finger at Pope Francis, we have to also be introspective and say, like, yeah, we've had priests and bishops who have said the same thing. They have said things like, all roads lead to God, or whatever it is, or it's all the same or something. So we have to be careful. But yeah, I think this is a problem. All right. Let's see what else here. I have one that I really did. There's a couple that I want to talk about, and it's something that Steve mentioned here. And that is this issue about blessing. I'm going to say it the way that, all the Pope-splainers would say it, and that was blessing individuals who were in same-sex unions, right? Who were in same-sex couples. So they were blessing individuals that were in same-sex couples. And I did a show on that, right? And the reason that we have to be careful about this, I even gave the example that we cannot, let's say that as a priest, I'm in an airport or something, and two men, they're holding hands, they come up to me and they say, Father, can I have a blessing? Right? Can I have a blessing? If they're standing there holding hands, I'm going to say, what well, what's going on here? Like, are you two a couple? And they're going to say, oh yeah, we're married by the state of Pennsylvania. I'll say, well, I'm sorry. I cannot extend a blessing to you. I'm sorry. What I can do is talk to you right now about what the gospel teaches about this, right? Like this is a problem. And this is all part of the problem of politics within the Roman Catholic Church and trying to force an agenda, force the things to happen within the church using the power of the papacy. This happened with this blessing of Roman of gay couples. I'm sorry, individuals who are in homosexual unions, but also I think personally scurrilous reduction of the ability for people to seek out the Latin Mass. Now, I'm no fan of the Latin Mass simply because in the way that the Latin Mass has been elevated to its status in this day, the way that it actually is expressed is more like the height of Roman Catholic theology and liturgy was in the 1940s, right? It was in the 1940s. And if we just go back to that, and so you had trad communities, you have these Latin Mass communities, and it kind of looks like they're going back to the 1940s. It's a very odd thing, let alone the idea that the Latin Mass itself, which all they had to do in Vatican II, if they wanted to make a few tweaks, fine, but just put it in English. Put it in English, right? I mean, put the thing in English and it would have been done. It would have been so simple. They would have solved all of these problems. Now, if it was, there was too much heaviness or whatever, fine. But my goodness gracious, instead, what you're doing is you're going back to a Mass that requires you to have a missal that has Latin on one side and English or your language on the other. So yeah, the Latin Mass is more, it is more beautiful. It's more reverent. Absolutely. Absolutely. However, they ended up changing the entire Mass. They ended up modernizing the entire Mass. And now Pope Francis ended up suppressing the Latin Mass. So this is a sign that the Roman Catholic Church always seems to grapple with the idea of power. And why? Well, you have a pope. You have a pope who has ultimate power, direct jurisdiction over every Roman Catholic Christian, right? This is a problem because then he has this kind of power where you can change the church and move it into a direction wherever you want. And that's really, I think, in a way, Francis's papacy is a reflection of the pitfalls of having a bishop with universal jurisdiction. That's the problem. Some of the other things that we heard, they came out with rules. The Vatican came out with rules that said that if someone was transgender, That is, that they went through an operation thinking that they became the other sex, which of course they didn't. It's just ridiculous. But the Vatican came out with this rules that said, if someone is transgender, they can be not only baptized, but they can be sponsors. They can be sponsors for a baptism, sponsors for a wedding. And there were rules around it. They said, as long as it doesn't cause scandal. I don't know what that means, right? But because that's just in the eye of the beholder. But they permitted that. This is not good. This is not good. Okay? Now, one thing that I do want to say, however, and this one is probably going to rub everybody the wrong way, okay? And that is one thing that was constantly said about Pope Francis was pointing out his humility. Pointing out his humility, okay? Now, please forgive me if this seems a little bit judgmental or over the top or something like this, right? I believe, now hear me out. This is my theory, okay? Here's my theory. Pope Francis comes from a particular generation, right? He's a boomer. He's a boomer. And generally speaking, boomers, it didn't matter whether they were Roman Catholics or Orthodox or Lutheran or anything else. That was a big time of reform. Everything was being reformed. Society was being reformed. Politics was being reformed. Social norms were being reformed. Gender roles were being reformed. This was a really big thing in the 1960s. And that's the era that Pope Francis kind of was formed in. And we have, by the way, many theologians, scholars, priests, bishops who also grew up in that era and admired the reforms of Vatican II, which eventually, and some people say, well, that's not what Vatican II was supposed to happen. And then all of a sudden it happened and they turned around the altars and they got rid of all the beauty in the church and they changed the mass and they got rid of the statues, right? Like you've heard all of this. That's true. It actually happened in some Orthodox churches too. That's true. And there was this issue. Now check this out. There was this issue that the church was too heavy. It was too heavy in ritual. It was too heavy in being a kind of top-down organization. That we shouldn't do things like, we should all be equal, and we shouldn't do things like, and here's the example that I'm going to give, okay? The example that I'm going to give, and I forgot to play it for, I forgot to send it to Simon, but it's a short video of Pope Francis pulling his hand away when somebody went to kiss his papal ring, okay? Somebody went to kiss his papal ring, and he's pulling his hand away. I know some boomer priests that do that too. And it's done kind of under the guise of humility, but it's problematic. And here's why it's problematic. Number one, as priests or as bishops, everyone should recognize, and certainly the priest and the bishop should recognize, when you ask for a blessing, what does the priest say? The priest doesn't say, I bless you. Like, you don't want my blessing. Why would you want my blessing? the priest says, the blessing of the Lord be on you. The blessing of the Lord be upon you, right? And as Orthodox Christians, what do? You approach the priest with your hands like this, or the bishop, and the priest or the bishop blesses you and puts his hand in your hand, and you kiss it, right? Now, what I've seen before is, and I know I'm going to get in trouble for this, I don't care. Like some priests they'll go, whoop, right? They'll pull their hand out, whoop. And it's usually older priests, right? Because they think that's like humble. When I went to Greece last year, it's the same thing. I would go up for a blessing and I'd pull it up, right? This is not right. This is not good. And it's not good because you are not giving your blessing. You are imparting the blessing of God. And that person that is seeking the blessing, they're kissing your hand because it's not your hand. It's the hand that touches the Eucharist, right? It's the right hand. It's the hand of the power of God. That's why you bless with your right hand. That's why you give communion with your right hand, right? And the reason that I bring this up is Pope Francis was known as very humble. So he did things like, I'm not going to live in the Vatican. I'm going to live outside the Vatican. I think he's not even being buried in the Vatican. He's being buried outside the Vatican. He's not going to be laid out on a bier. He's going to be laid in a simple casket. On the one hand, yes, I understand it and I get it. On the other hand, in my estimation, it is just like stripping down the church, just like stripping down the liturgy, just like saying that somehow the church is too heavy and priests should not wear robes and crosses and, beards and whatever. Like, we should just be modern. We should just be simple. Well, in the Roman Catholic Church, what that did was it brought in the kind of groovy 60s, right? Where you had Peter, Paul, and Mary masses, and you had masses where they would just sit around in a circle, and you would use an earthen chalice and right? Like, it had to be simple and it had to be kind of primitive. So this kind of thinking that this is humility is wrong. This is wrong. The problem, listen to what I'm saying. The problem in the church is not robes and icons and blessings and hats and beards and, whatever. That's not the problem. The problem is the human heart. You don't accomplish anything. You don't accomplish anything by taking those things away. And somehow what happened in Roman Catholicism is now the human desire for beauty and richness has overtaken the modernism project, right? And what's happening? The trad churches are full. The Orthodox churches are growing. There's a lesson here. This is a lesson. It's very important for us to understand that if somebody says, oh, why so many icons? Let's just keep it simple. Why are your robes so? Let's just keep it. Why do you have to have a golden chalice? Can't you just use something simple? No. Were you not in church on Holy Wednesday night when the Lord is at the home and Mary pours costly spikenard on his head? And what happens? The disciples, and especially Judas, oh, all this waste. We could have given this money to the poor. And he says, the poor you're going to have always with you. Me, you don't always have. Let her do this. She's doing a good thing. She's doing this for my burial. And everywhere that the gospel is preached, a memorial will be said of this woman. It's amazing. So, you know, the idea of somehow bringing the world into the church to make it more worldly is such a mistake. It's such a terrible mistake. And we have to recognize what that does. And I think in a way we're seeing that. We're seeing that in the Roman Catholic Church. All right. Just a couple little things, then we're going to wrap it up. Next slide here. We had, I would say about 4 years ago, Archbishop Charles Chaput on the show. Archbishop Charles Chaput. Now, I got all the, oh, why are you having a Catholic on there? Why are you having a Catholic bishop? What's wrong with you? This man, by the way, is so astute. He's so well-spoken. He's so Christian. He wrote a book called Things Worth Dying For. Go read it. It's a tremendous book. Tremendous book. He wasn't, he was the archbishop. He was the Archbishop of Philadelphia. And interestingly, there's a little politics in the Roman Catholic Church, right? When bishops are, I think it's like 75 in the Roman Catholic Church. When bishops are 75, I think it is, forgive me if that's not right, they have to present their resignation to the Pope. And the Pope decides whether they can retire or not, right? And it was very telling because the ones that Pope Francis wanted to retire were all the conservatives, including Archbishop Chaput. All right. So here's a slide here. I have just 2 slides of his quotes. He does say something nice at the beginning. I didn't put it in that because we don't have much time. But he says this about Pope Francis. This is the retired Archbishop Chaput of Chicago. His personality tended toward the temperamental and autocratic. He resisted even loyal criticism. He had a pattern of ambiguity and loose words that sowed confusion and conflict. In the face of deep cultural fractures on matters of sexual behavior and identity, he condemned gender ideology, but seemed to downplay a compelling Christian theology of the body. He was impatient with canon law and proper procedure. His signature project, synodality, was heavy on process and deficient in clarity. Despite an inspiring outreach to society's margins, his papacy lacked a confident, dynamic, evangelistic zeal. Next slide. The intellectual, listen to this. The intellectual excellence to sustain a salvific and not merely ethical Christian witness in a skeptical modern world was likewise absent. What the church needs going forward is a leader who can marry personal simplicity with a passion for converting the world to Jesus Christ, a leader who has a heart of courage and a keen intellect to match it. Anything less won't work. Now, he's talking about the Roman Catholic Church. Again, not our problem. But this man, I'm telling you, Chaput was one of the top archbishops. And when he retired, he's very vigorous, right? Like he's very energetic, even to this day. Pope Francis received his resignation, his retirement. And he shouldn't have, but he did because he's conservative. Okay. Last thing, we're going to watch one short video. This video is by a YouTube channel called Catholic Unscripted. Okay. And this particular speaker on here, let me see here. This is, his first name is Gavin, and I can't remember. Let's see. It was the Queen's chaplain. He was the Queen's chaplain in Great Britain. His name was Gavin Ashenden. Okay. He was a priest of the Church of England. Then he became an Anglican bishop. All right. And then he converted to the Roman Catholic Church when Anglican went off the rails. Anglicanism went off the rails. All right. Now, this is, you have to listen to this, okay? Because it shows you the deep tension in the Roman Catholic Church. I'm just bringing it to you, okay? But listen to what Gavin Ashenden said, who left being an Anglican bishop, left his career to become a Roman Catholic. Listen to this.
Yeah, wonderful. Gavin, Mark spoke about this very popular word in the current milieu, which is optics. How things appear is very important in this age of media and social media and fast media. And it's true to say, isn't it, Gavin, that the way the Pope is perceived, let's say outside the church and around the world, is a Pope of great humility and reaching out to the margins and to the poor. And he is well loved and will be very much missed. But Mark's also right to point to that tension that from looking from an internal perspective, when you perhaps see a little bit more about what's going on behind the scenes, it's not quite as simple as that, is it?
It's very complicated, and I'd rather not have to do this because I don't want to speak ill of the dead. My sense of him dying was one of enormous relief, like a toothache or a headache going away, and I'm really sorry to say that. I pray for his soul. I don't know the real Jorge Bergoglio, but of course I pray for him, and of course I forgive him. But I had a constant sense of oppression from his presence, one that the Holy Father shouldn't bring. So maybe I was wrong and oversensitive. One has to assume that's a possibility. But if you're asking me to speak from my experience, I better do that rather than try somebody else's. I think we have to distinguish between his personal characteristics and his policy characteristics. I found his personal characteristics very difficult. I found it incredibly upsetting when he took revenge on Cardinal, was it Muller or Burke, and had him thrown out of his apartment.
Both. I think he did it to both, Gavin, yeah.
Okay, well, I found that beyond reprehensible. These were good men. They deserved in their retirement to be honoured by the church. They worked very hard. They'd done nothing wrong whatsoever. And to be turned on by the chief shepherd and made homeless. So you see, I can't buy into any of this. I love the poor and I love the homeless. CRAP, because he made people homeless when it was down to him. He didn't do anything for the real homeless apart from the optics, but he had no difficulty in making his colleagues homeless when they offended him.
All right. You know, there's a lot of hurt Roman Catholics. There's a lot of Roman Catholics that are really hurt. And, you know, there is this tension now because they love the papacy and they love the Pope, but they felt let down, even betrayed by some of the agenda, by some of the confusion of Pope Francis. I think we Orthodox need to learn from that. We need to learn from this. You know, some Orthodox still didn't learn their lesson from watching what happened with Vatican II. And maybe they're not learning from what's happening with Pope Francis. We can't reduce the church to politics. We have to be very, very careful that, the church is not a political organization. And we can't use the church to assert a political agenda. And there are some bishops, even in the US, Orthodox bishops, that are doing that. Clearly, they have a political agenda. They have to stop it. That this is not right. This is not good. The church is not here to fulfill someone's political agenda. You can't do that. And so, we have to be very careful, because if you do that, you can wait it out. Bishops eventually die, but the bishops have to learn, cannot use the church as your instrument to assert your political agenda. This is not right. We have to preserve the apostolic tradition. And by preserve, I mean live. Not preserve like protect in a refrigerator. Preserve meaning live out, express, teach. This is what our job is as Orthodox Christians, and I would say bishops should be doing this. All right, one question came in, and then we're just going to do one real quick slide from Father Thomas Hopko. Quick question came in, and it said, what was the question? What is a cardinal? This came into the text line. What is a cardinal, and why do they vote for a new pope instead of Roman Catholic bishops and archbishops? Well, I am definitely not an expert on this, but AI might be. So I just did a little search here. I think this is right. The role of cardinals in the Catholic Church developed gradually, evolving from a group of prominent priests, I think they were deacons, in Rome, to their modern role as advisors and electors of the Pope. The term cardinal means hinge, first appeared in the Liber Pontificalis in the context of a Roman synod in 769, which mandated that the Roman pontiff should be elected from among the deacons and cardinal priests, right? Cardinal, like in this sense, I think cardinal means first, right? Cardinal. Okay. So yeah, you can go look at that. It's something that was a Roman thing, but it developed later. Okay, last slide. Thanks for hanging in there. Father Thomas Hopko wrote an absolutely brilliant piece in 2005, and I want you to go read the whole thing. It's long, and it's called The Roman Presidency. I think it's called The Roman Presidency and Christian Unity in Our Time. Now, again, don't get all triggered when we say Christian unity. But this is what it was called. Roman Presidency and Christian Unity in Our Time. Because he was asserting this is what the Roman Catholic Church has to do if you want unity with the Orthodox. But in this paper, he says these things, and this is a really good rundown, not of all Roman Catholic doctrines and practices that we disagree with, but regarding papal role, the papal privilege. Here's what he said. The Roman Church's current official teachings about papal privilege and power that are unacceptable to the Orthodox churches are the dogma of the Pope's infallibility when speaking officially from the chair of Peter on matters of faith and morals from himself and not from the consensus of the Church. Next, the binding character of the Pope's infallible decrees on all Roman Catholic Christians in the world. Next, the Pope's direct episcopal jurisdiction over all Roman Catholic Christians in the world. Next, the Pope's authority to appoint and so also to depose the bishops of all Roman Catholic churches. And the affirmation that the legitimacy and the authority of all Roman Catholic Christian bishops in the world derive from their union with the Roman See and its bishop, the supreme pontiff, the unique successor of Peter and vicar of Christ on earth. And what Father Tom Hopko is saying is these are false teachings according to the Orthodox faith. They are unacceptable to us. And you can debate this all you want. You can you can quote mine, you can find some obscure text somewhere, but these are the teachings that we disagree with regarding the Pope. And I would even say that when we look at the pontificate of Pope Francis, we have to recognize the danger of unbridled power of a bishop. In Orthodoxy, we have nothing like this. It's not just that we don't have a pope. Even patriarchs, okay? Patriarchs, metropolitans of autocephalous churches, they don't have that kind of power. Sometimes Roman Catholics will say, well, you have patriarchs, you have metropolitans. They can't do anything like this. Nothing. The only thing they can do, which is historically what the Roman Pope could do, and that is they could intervene when they are invited, and they can be the sort of the court of last jurisdiction, right? That's it. That's it. So this is a problem. And this is where we think an unbridled papacy leads. This is the problem. And this is the problem with Pope Francis's reign in the Roman Catholic Church, because you can have any pope who gets a political agenda in his craw, and then he tries his best to assert it onto the church without challenge. And even when bishops were questioning, right, they were submitting these so-called dubia, the questions, they just didn't answer them. Or they answered them in a very cursory way. This is a problem, okay? Okay, last slide. So, Orthodox Christians, what can we learn? The modernism project leads to stagnation. There's no doubt about it. The stagnating part of Roman Catholicism, and I would also say the stagnating part of the Orthodox Church, is the part that is moving toward modernism, that is trying to embrace the modern understanding, the scientific, the rationalistic understanding of humanity in the world, right? This is a problem. We can also say that we've learned clarity of teaching is the key. And by the way, Orthodox are not immune from this problem. Bishops are the primary teachers of the Orthodox faith, and they must hold it with a clear conscience. And that means they need to be the most learned. I don't mean just in terms of degrees, college degrees. I'm speaking about holding, as it says in the scriptures, holding the faith with a clear conscience, like really understanding it and being able to communicate it. You have to communicate this clearly. You have to understand what is the tradition of the Orthodox Church. What is the traditional teaching of the church about X, whatever it is, right? And we've made some missteps in these areas. And I'll tell you another thing, we should not be relying on YouTubers, including myself, to figure out what the church's teaching is. This is a big mistake. Your bishop is the one that's supposed to be explaining the church's teaching to you. And I would also say bishops should be both approachable and have high stature. In other words, the bishop should be the one, when he comes into your parish, you should be able to talk to him respectfully, And you should respect him deeply because he is the image of Christ. This is St. Ignatius of Antioch, right? He is the image of Christ in the church. He is the one around whom we gather. And that's why bishops are important. They're not supposed to be figureheads, and they're not supposed to be this doll that we dress up on Sunday and then, send him on his way. They're supposed to be the one that inspires us to live the gospel, to preach the gospel, right? Not to assert a political agenda. Those are the bishops we need. And we have bishops like that in the church, to be sure. Absolutely. And we have some bishops that don't. But we don't have a pope. And the reason why we don't have a pope is it's not within the tradition of the church. We don't have that is a universal papacy. We have the Pope of Alexandria, of course. We don't have a universal papacy, and we should ensure that we don't raise any bishop or patriarch to have that kind of role, because it is not within our tradition. All right? Hey, listen, have some charity. If you want to pray for Pope Francis, for his soul, pray for his soul. This is a Christian thing to do. We should never say online, oh, we can't pray for him. Oh, he's a heretic. This is ridiculous. You have to pray for everyone. Doesn't mean you have to have a full Orthodox funeral for him, but you have to pray, that God would be merciful to him and to you. It's very important. All right? Hey, have a tremendous rest of the Bright Week. I'm looking forward to it. I hope that your Paschal celebration was really beautiful. Orthodox Christianity is the most amazing gift. Nobody does Pascha like we do. You know that. You Orthodox Christians know that. That's why you're still smiling, even on Tuesday of Pascha. We're not forgetting about it. We've got 40 days to enjoy this. Enjoy every day of it. That's our show for tonight. Remember to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/ancientfaithtoday. Share out our program after it's posted. Give us your feedback. Contact us with any ideas or topics that you might want to hear about. Join us next Tuesday afternoon, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific time for another edition of Ancient Faith Today. Christ is risen. Truly he is risen.